we're recording this, spoiler, before the college football playoff second round of rankings come out. But I think how the committee decides to legislate Alabama and LSU is going to be really interesting, and Tennessee for that matter, who just lost that game at number one. Like, Jess, I don't know if there was a game, I feel like I have an idea of which one you thought might have been most impactful from this past weekend, but the Tennessee factor in the next round of this round of college football playoff rankings is going to be the most important part of the discussion.
Yeah, well, I think the Tennessee-Georgia game didn't maybe have as big of a playoff implication because Tennessee still has, they'll have a quality loss now, as the committee would call it, heading into the end of the season. As long as they win out, I think they'll still make it. But I also think the Clemson-Notre Dame game had significant implications to, I think something that may be fundamentally broken with Clemson's current team, their roster construction, their staff. Dabo had a ton of criticism going into the season about promoting internally for these coordinator positions, and just watching the game and reading the Tigers message boards afterwards, fans are not happy about any of those coordinators. I mean, it's not just Notre Dame fans who want to fire their coordinators after wins and losses. Like, Clemson fans are ready to just clean house. Jeff Scott getting fired this weekend, I think, also has invigorated this fan base now to try to get him to come back to Clemson. So I think, although I don't know if I think if Clemson had won the ACC championship, they'd be in no matter what. But they still have a shot, even if they win out, beat North Carolina in the ACC championship. I still think they have a shot at making the playoff, but I think that this maybe speaks to something that fans have felt uncomfortable about since the beginning of last season, when they lost to Georgia in the opener 10-3 or whatever that horrible score was. And maybe maybe at this point now, having been humiliated on the road, some adjustments will actually get made that might have skated by till the end of the season if they had another playoff run or ACC championship win.
That is an interesting way to think about, will it force Clemson to change? Because Dabo's been pretty stuck on, I am not going to really meddle with a ton of the portal stuff in college football. He's been fiercely loyal to the people that have been inside that program as far as coaches. Been fiercely loyal to DJ Uiagalelei, who a lot of people thought should have been pulled sooner than he was for Cade Klubnik in that game on the road. And so you do wonder, now that's a program that survived a really bad season last year. I thought played even, worse than we've seen. Do you think any part of that loss, Jess, was more embarrassing or more troublesome than what they dealt with at the beginning of last year in so many of those close games where it seemed like DJ had an even tougher time?
Yeah, because I think last year, they got off to a pretty poor start and lost the game in overtime to NC State, lost to Pitt, and then they ended up salvaging it and going 10-3, which I think ended up being a success. Now, in the offseason, losing Brent Venables, it can't be overstated how big of a blow that is, because, as you said, Dabo likes to promote his guys and be supportive and promote from within, like Clemson guys. But Brent Venables was an outsider when he came to Clemson, and that was probably the most successful coordinator Dabo's ever had. And even looking at his offensive coordinators who have left Clemson, their coaching record as Power 5 or as FBS coaches is just so bad compared to their success as coordinators with Clemson. None of them, like Chad Morris, Tony Elliott. Tony Elliott's his first year, but Jeff Scott, they've all had really tough times as head coaches. And so, yeah, it's just something that I think, you knew going into the season losing Brent Venables was going to sting. And you knew going into the season Dabo was going to try to make it work with DJ as he did last year. And to DJ's credit, I think he's handled all of this incredibly well as a player. But I also, this game in particular, I question the timing of pulling DJ, putting in your backup, who's, he's a 5-star. He's got a lot of confidence coming after that Syracuse game management situation where he came in and helped them secure that victory after DJ wasn't playing so hot. And then you put him in and he throws an interception on his second play of the game. I don't understand. It felt like something Brian Kelly would have done in 2012 or 2011. And that is something that Dabo doesn't do very often. He hasn't had to, because he's had Trevor Lawrence and he's had Deshaun Watson. He's kind of had the situation with Kelly Bryant 3 years ago. But I
was just going to say that was not that there's too much political conversation already in the ether, but that was a more peaceful transfer of power that situation. where we saw it was a clean break. It was, we're going to go with Trevor Lawrence from here on out. It is going to be his team. I think that might have been either before or after they played Syracuse. That's always sort of traditionally been a wonky game for modern Clemson football. But this one has been a lot of back and forth. And after that Cape thing, you had Dabo come out and very publicly cape for DJ again. So it put him in a kind of a tough bind.
I know, and I do admire that he's loyal to DJ, because I think that like a lot of DJ's and a lot of his issues stem from what seems to be confidence issues, because like one minute he's playing lights out against Wake Forest and going toe for toe against Sam Hartman, and the next minute he can't put together a drive. And so, whether it's the coordinators for just not being able to work with him and create a game plan that's going to make him look successful, or it's confidence issues, or whatever is going on behind the scenes there. Either way, like the way that it has now cost them a game is something that's probably a bigger indictment on like organizational dysfunction this season than anything else.
Dabo also said after, he said he was shocked by the loss. And like, that to me feels like such a dumb thing to say no matter what, because like you should not, I don't think you should ever as a coach be going into a situation to the point where you're shocked that you lose. Like I think you've got to tamp down whatever that is, that if that is imparted to your players, and then like what do they do next? Like it sort of leaves you reeling in a way that just to me seems like really dumb management.
Well, and that was it's interesting to hear some of these traditional powers that have looked a little more human, right? Like we're having the same conversation about Alabama to an extent, where after the Tennessee game, we heard from Will Anderson and from Nick Saban, and I'm paraphrasing a bit, but in some way, they were a bit rattled by the environment there in Knoxville, that so much of that situation seemed to affect an Alabama team in a way that we thought they were always bulletproof from. And so I think that's another part of what happened this weekend. Charlotte, to your point about Alabama losing at the same time Georgia went out and did that to Tennessee, kind of cemented that we're in Georgia's college football right now. Like, do you guys feel like that's the official baton handling between last year, Georgia obviously winning the national championship, to now? I don't know why I said I talked about handing off the baton and then fumbled my own hand off.
Me?
Go ahead, Sean.
I mean, yeah, I think so. And I think it was interesting because when I was at Georgia for the Auburn game, there were a lot of fans who were still so not sold on Stetson Bennett, like angry that he was their quarterback. And I was like, okay, I get it from a point of view of like, here's a guy with a flip phone who like shows up late to interviews and is like a scrawny, like what? Yeah, sure. But like, he won a national championship and you're undefeated. So I don't quite understand. Maybe it's just like ingrained Georgia fear that you're like hedging your bets from, 40 years. But I watching this team, it's like, all right, well, it's like not fun really to like I did not enjoy the Tennessee game. I was like, well, like this, I love Tennessee, Alabama, because it was like either one could win. And this, I was like, oh, well, it was like running into a brick wall every time Tennessee had the ball. So I really hope that Georgia loses to a surprising team, because that'll make it interesting again. Because otherwise it's just like, okay, cool.
I don't know if it's a handing off of a baton, just for the fact that like, I don't feel comfortable saying Nick Saban is out of anything until the man retires and literally like moves to some desolate island home somewhere. Which, I mean, maybe he would never even do. He'll probably just like stick around for decades and like haunt the next current head coach of Alabama. But like, I think Alabama's problems maybe stem from like their offensive coordinator not being the most creative college football mind, their 5-star quarterback, Heisman finalist, getting injured early on in the season and not being able to shake the cobwebs off afterwards. Like, they're not the most disciplined Alabama team of the last few years. Like, they've been called on a lot of penalties. They don't look the same as Alabama 3 seasons ago, or 2 seasons ago, 3 seasons ago. But I also don't think that, like, expecting anything less from Nick Saban has been a good prediction on anyone's part for a while. So, like, I don't think they're going to make the playoff. They have 2 losses now. They're probably out of it. But they didn't make the playoff in 2019 either, and then won the national championship the next year.